Hello class, today we are going to talk about spheres. Specifically, we are going to talk about surface area and volume of spheres. So, before we get into that, a little bit of definitions. Sphere. Everybody remembers what a sphere is. This is a ball, right? Technically, it is the set of all points in three-dimensional space that are equidistant from a center. All right? So, kind of like a circle, but in three-dimensional space instead of two-dimensional. And that distance from the center is called the radius. So the distance all the way across through the center is the diameter. Now, this circle here, if you have a circle on the sphere, and the center of this circle is also the center of the sphere, that is called a great sphere. So this circle here, this is a great circle. So this circle here, not a great circle, because the center of this circle is not the center of the sphere. So that one's no good. Great circle. Important thing about this, the great circle will divide a sphere into two hemispheres. All right, so here I have a great circle. You can see the center of the circle is the center of the sphere, and so that divides it into two hemispheres, half of a sphere. Also, the circumference of the sphere is the same as the circumference of the great circle. All right, so just some definition stuff. So here we go. Surface area of a sphere is 4 pi r squared, all right, where r is the radius of the sphere. And one way to think about that, think about a baseball. If you have a baseball and you take that leather covering off, that leather covering is kind of sort of 4 different circles, right? And it wraps around the sphere. And the area of one circle is pi r squared, and I have 4 circles, so this is 4 pi r squared, all right? And so that is surface area of a sphere. It's 4 pi r squared. So let's do a couple with this. Find the surface area of each sphere. So here we have this. We're going to start with the formula, 4 pi r squared. Plug in the radius. Radius is 8. So we plug that in. 4 times pi times 8 squared. 8 squared is 64. 64 times 4 is 256. So we have 256 pi. Again, if you talked about this before, but if your problem wants the exact answer, it wants it in terms of pi. Or if it says in terms of pi, this is what it wants. All right? So if it wants the exact answer, if it wants it in terms of pi, this is it. This is your answer, and you're done. If it wants it rounded off, then stick that on your calculator, see what that is, 256 times pi, and you get approximately 804 1/4, right? Square inches, approximately, because this is rounded off. Pi goes on forever, so we got to round it. Okay, so here we go. Let's do another one. Actually, what I would like for you to do is pause the video, you work this one out, then come back and check your work. All right, let's see how you did. So notice this time it did not give us radius, it gave us circumference. Well, we have the same formula, right? Surface area is 4 pi r squared, but I need to know what r is. Well, I have circumference. This is the circumference of a great circle, which means it's the circumference of my sphere. All right? So still, I can use circumference to find radius, right? So circumference is 2 pi r. So I just got to figure out what r is. Plug in what I know. I know circumference is 12 pi. So I have 12 pi equals 2 pi r. We want to get rid of that 2 pi, so we divide both sides by 2 pi. And 12 pi divided by 2 pi is 6. And so r equals 6. So now I can take my radius, I can plug it into my formula. So I have 4 pi times 6 squared. And 6 squared is 36. 36 times 4 is 144. So if I want an exact answer, if I want the answer in terms of pi, there it is. I'm done. If I want it rounded off, it is approximately 452.39 square feet. So not too bad. Pretty easy stuff so far. All right. Here I want to find the surface of the hemisphere, so half of a sphere. Now before I jump into this, I want to find the formula for the surface of a hemisphere. Right? Well, it's a hemisphere. It's half of a sphere, so obviously it would be half the surface of the sphere, right? Except if I cut that sphere in half, I now have a flat circle on the bottom, don't I? So what I have is half the sphere plus that base. All right, so surface of a hemisphere is half the surface of the sphere plus the base. And so we have 1/2 of 4 pi r squared plus the base, which is a circle, so that's another pi r squared. Half of 4 pi r squared would be 2 pi r squared, plus another pi r squared is 3 pi r squared. So the surface area of a hemisphere is 3 pi r squared. And so now let's plug our radius into that formula. So 3 pi r squared, plug in 5 for the radius, and so let's see, 3 times 5 squared. 5 squared is 25. 25 times 3 is 75. So 75 pi, if it wants exact answers. Or stick that in our calculator. 75 pi is approximately 235.62 square meters. All right. So now I would like for you to do this one. Okay, you got your formula right here, so just plug it in, pause the video, and check your work. All right, let's see how you did. Let's see this. So we've got our formula, 3 pi r squared. So we plug in 6 for the radius, not the 12. The 12 is the diameter, right? So we want half of that, 6. And 6 squared is 36 times 3 is 108. So we have 108 pi, which is approximately 339.29 square inches. All right. So that's surface area. Obviously, if I wanted the lateral area of the hemisphere, it would just be the 2 pi r squared, because I wouldn't want the base. All right. So let's take a look at volume. Volume is 4/3 pi r cubed. All right. 4/3 pi r cubed. So a little bit more complicated, but not much. So here we go. Let's do something with this. We want the volume of the soccer ball. Well, let's see, we got a 4.5 inches there, so that's going to be the radius, which is what I need. So we start with our formula, 4/3 pi r cubed, plug in 4.5 for the radius, and that one I cannot do in my head. So let's get the calculator up right here, and so we have, I'm just going to do this all at once, 4/3 times 4.5 cubed, which is 121.5. So there we go. We have 121.5 pi. And so if we want to take that, and so times pi, and we get approximately 381.7 cubic inches. All right, remember, volume is cubic units, surface area is square units. All right. So here's something a little bit different. What is the radius of a sphere if we have a volume of 872 cubic feet to the nearest tenth of a foot? All right. So this time it's telling us the volume and saying, what's the radius? All right, that's not too bad. Okay, we've got volume, so we've got a formula with volume. So let's start with our formula for volume. There it is. Volume is 4/3 pi r cubed. And we're going to plug in what we know. I know, not the radius this time. This time I know the volume. So I'm going to plug in that 872 for the volume. There it is. So 872 equals 4/3 pi r squared. Pi r cubed. I just want to get r by itself. So that means I need to get rid of this 4/3 pi. And the way you're going to do that is divide by 4/3 pi. And that I'm going to need a calculator for, so let's do that. So 872 divided by, in parentheses, we have 4/3 pi. You do have to put this in parentheses, otherwise the division order of operations is going to go all wrong on you. Got to have that in parentheses. And we get 208.17466. Okay, we don't want to round this off until we absolutely have to, because otherwise it'll throw our answers off. So we have approximately 208.17147 equals r cubed. I don't want r cubed, I just want r. So how do you get rid of that cube? Well, just like when you get rid of a square, you square root it. We were going to cube root it. So we need to cube root both sides. So let's see here. I want cube root, which on my TI calculator, that is under math, and and you come down here to number 4. Cube root of that answer there, and we get 5.92665. Alright, so approximately rounded to the nearest tenth of a foot, 5.9. Approximately. Alright, so that was a little bit tricky. We started with the volume and we had to find the radius. We went backwards. Used that formula still. Alright, so we're going to do one more, and I would like for you to pause the video and see if you can work this one out on your own, and then come back and check your work. Alright, let's see here. So we want the diameter of a hemisphere given the volume of a hemisphere. So this is a little bit trickier, right? Very much like the previous one, except we're looking for the diameter of a hemisphere, not a sphere. So still not too bad, a couple extra steps. So before we jump into it, I want to figure out what is the volume of a hemisphere, right? Well, a hemisphere is half of a sphere. So the volume of the hemisphere is half the volume of a sphere. Sphere, we've already said, that's 4/3 pi r cubed. So half of 4/3 pi r cubed would be 2/3 pi r cubed. So there's a formula we're going to use, and we just plug into that. All right, so take our formula, 2/3 pi r cubed. We're going to plug in what we know. I don't know r, but I do know volume. So I'm going to plug in the volume. And I get that. 73,802 equals 2/3 pi r cubed. We want to get rid of this 2/3 pi, so we have our r by itself. So we're going to divide by 2/3 pi. And again, I cannot do that in my head. So 73802 divided by, in parentheses. Make sure you put this in parentheses, or the order of operations will screw it up. There we go. And what do we get? 35,237.8593333. Okay, so there. Now, again, we want to get rid of that cube, so we have r by itself, and to do that, we're going to cube root this. So that was math, and then 4 cube root, and then we're going to just arrow up and grab that. There it is. And that gives me approximately 32.7846 for the radius. But the question doesn't want the radius, it wants the diameter. So how do you find diameter? Well, that's not too bad. That's just 2 radius, right? Alright, so we're going to take this for the radius and plug that in. And so 2 times that, so take the answer, times 2. And there it is, approximately 65.569, yada, yada, yada. There. And let's see, it wants our answer rounded to the nearest tenth of a foot. So instead of 65.5692, we will have 65.6 feet, approximately. All right, so one thing that's very, very important. Notice I started rounding this way up here, right? But I didn't actually round it. In my calculator, I kept all of those exact answers. That's very, very important. If you start rounding way up here, then cube rooting and doubling and all of that is going to throw your answer off. And it won't throw it off much, but it might throw it off enough that when you round to that tenth of a foot at the end, that you see it could have said, 65.54, right? Which would make this stay as a 5, and then you're going to get your answer wrong, okay? Do not round in the intermediate steps unless you absolutely have to. So try very hard not to do that. And if you do have to round it off for whatever reason, round it off to like 5 decimal places. Go at least 2 decimal places past what the question asks for. So if it says tenths, go to at least the thousandths. If it says hundredths, go to at least the 10,000ths. All right? All right. So, just refresh formulas. Volume for a hemisphere, 2/3 pi r cubed. Volume for a sphere, 4/3 pi r cubed. Volume, surface area for a hemisphere is 3 pi r squared. If you want the lateral area of a hemisphere, that would be just this part right here, the 2 pi r squared. All right. And surface area of a sphere is 4 pi r squared. that is entirely lateral. There's no total. Lateral area of a sphere and total surface area of a sphere are the same thing, because spheres have no base. All right? And hopefully you found that useful. I will see you in the next video.